Hickok 45 here. Welcome to the Hickok 45 Talks channel. Another thing that someone asked me to talk about, and this comes up pretty often, is talk about my holdover when shooting at longer ranges. Holdover with the sights. Because, and this is a question that comes along quite a lot. People are curious, especially shooters who maybe shoot a lot and they just don't shoot at longer ranges with the handguns, especially, of course. This is an issue, more of an issue. And I think people envision me holding over even at the 80-yard gong or 75 yards with a handgun, especially a small handgun. They just assume I'm probably like aiming at a tree limb about 10 feet above the target or something like that. What am I keying on? Because that bullet has to be dropping a lot, especially with a handgun. And, well, not necessarily. You might be surprised to know that on this first hill, the 50 and 60 and 70 and the 80 yards, the gong, I really don't experience much of that to where I have to really think about where I'm holding now. If it's just a standard load, 45 Colt or whatever, 44 Special, those sorts of things, 38 Special, you do lose some velocity. You get out there 50, well, obviously 50, 100 yards. But on the animals, on the first hill, it's 60, 75 yards, whatever, a gong. Sometimes I'll notice out there at beyond 70 yards, okay, it's dropping down once it gets out there a little bit, and I'll make sure I hold a little bit higher on the animal. And same for the gong. I need to hold up in the, top half of the gong or something. But at those ranges, I'm not holding over the target. I don't like holding over the target. I want to focus on the target. I don't mind knowing I'm out at long range that I need to put the sight, maybe I can take more of a 6 o'clock hold or on the lower part of the target at 20 yards, 30 yards. And then when I get out there, I need to hold up midway to a little bit higher on the animal, the pig, whatever it is, turkey. That's okay. That's okay. And that's what I might have to do with some rounds. Now, if it's a fast Magnum handgun, I tell you, I don't think it changes much, really. Even out to 80 yards sometimes, I don't really notice a lot of difference in where I have to hold. It's like a hot, 44 Magnum, 357 Magnum round. That's not enough to write home about in terms of, the difference. So I'm not like holding above those animals, okay? So that might be a surprise to some of you. And, yeah, I don't know. I'm trying to think of a round. Occasionally, but it's rare, there'll be some round that I just notice is dropping a lot. It might be a 38 Special that's particularly weak. 38 Special, there you can buy some of that stuff. It's very low velocity, and then you get out at 75 yards, you do notice it, going below the animal a little bit. If you're holding on the animal maybe, but that's rare. So generally, I'm holding right on the animal, and of course the gong, it's bigger, but right maybe just a little bit higher when I get out there on that hillside. Now, when it gets to 230 yards, if you've seen some of those videos from the early days, and I know John pulled one of those, a clip from one of the long clip from one of those recently on the Hickok 45 Clips channel, where, what was I shooting? A Glock 23, I believe. And it was neat seeing that again. I hadn't seen those videos in a long time. And now, when we did 5 or 6 of those really early on, and partly just demonstrating, breaking myths, dispelling myths that handguns are not accurate at long range. There's no way you can hit something at 230 yards with a handgun. And I guess since those early days, other people have done that sort of thing. So most people are kind of aware that can be done. Of course, and I'm not the best shot in the world. The gong's pretty big, but it's at 230 yards. It's a long way out there. It's not easy to hit a car door at 230 yards, with a handgun. It's that simple. Now, when you get to 230 yards, it's a little different story, but I still do not like holding above the target. And you could do that. You could figure out, there's usually a wall behind that target, 230 yards. There's now, always has been, I guess, wall of logs or whatever. I could pick out a point on that wall maybe. In fact, if I were sighting that way, I'd probably have some marks on that wall behind there, some white lines or something, and to key on. And I might be able to shoot better doing that, really. But I kind of use the old Elmer Keith method where I just hold up, and I got trying that, and holding up the front sight instead of taking a level sight picture, rear sight, front sight, holding up the front sight a little bit up higher in the notch, which I don't particularly like doing that, but it seems to work at least at 230 yards. So I can hold that up in the notch about halfway. Depending on the gun, I think we did that with a Glock 27, in fact, one of those. But I had to hold up one of them, I remember, up all the sight totally up the notch. But I had taken practice shots and messed with it and kind of figured out when I was hitting it. Can't hit it every time, but if I held that sight up totally in a notch. So then you got a couple of things you're kind of indexing. You got to get to hold the sight on the target still when you pull the trigger, right? But also keep an eye on your front sight, because it needs to be held up in that notch the same amount each time. If you just level them up, that's what we normally do, right? But that's easier. But if you're having to put that front sight up a certain amount, and I think Elmer Keith had little marks on his front sight, a little brass inlay or something, gold, whatever, to where if he was at a certain distance, he would raise that front sight up in the notch and level it up with that gold bead or that little gold line or whatever brass on his front sight. I don't have anything like that. I just kind of figure out how much of it I need to hold up, and that's what I was doing. I don't do that much anymore, but that's what I was doing on the 230 yards, because 230 yards, probably not a handgun out there where you're going to be able to take the same sight picture that you do at 50 yards, and just expect that bullet to hit where it was. Unless it's a 5.56 handgun or something, it's just going to drop enough. Okay, so hope that gives you some idea. But on the general shooting, even at 70, 80 yards, not a lot of no holdover. I don't like to shoot holding over. Now I don't even raise up the front sight and the notch, on the first hill out to 80 yards. I don't even do that. I just line up the sights sometimes, like I said, a little higher maybe on the turkey or the pig if necessary to make sure I'm hitting it. Okay, and I have noticed sometimes there's a little difference. Once you get that bullet out there at 60 yards, sometimes it's like a baseball. It kind of drops a little bit quicker once it gets out there a certain distance. That makes sense. And so I might be holding about the same way at 50 or 60 yards on, say, the first row of pigs or whatever. But then I notice when I get on up that top row of like the buffalo, and there's a pig up there and that kind of thing, not too far from the gong, then it's dropping a little bit more, and I might be hitting low. You probably noticed that in the video. So I got to hold up on the animal a little bit more. All right, a lot of talk, but I think that covers it. I'll be done. Life is good.